famous yachtsman's river in the world, it must be quite a privilege living and sailing from this place.
Well, it's interesting because when I travel around the world, which is quite extensive, people will say, well, where do you come from? And rather than saying from England, I say, I'm from Hamble. And immediately they say, yes, boats, Hamble. So even in the middle of Africa, I've actually been there and said Hamble. And hey presto, instant recognition. I'm sitting on the lawn in front of the RAF Yacht Club with a beautiful view of all the yachts behind me. We're on the Hamble River and considered the yachtsman's Mecca. It has over 3,000 yachts moored up, and the river itself has a phenomenal history. The River Hamble stretches 7.5 miles from its source in the north of Botley to its mouth at Hamble Point, where it opens into the Solent. Entering the river towards Hamble Point, keep the south cardinal mark well to port and follow the indicated channel, using the port and starboard piles down the river. Leading lights and beacons mark the channel well at night. But even so, don't be tempted to take a shortcut across the spit to the north of the cardinal mark, or the Hook Spit. For those departing, the steep bank on Hamble Spit is well marked. On the western side is Hamble, with its 3 sailing clubs, public jetty and public hard. Has excellent pubs, restaurants and shops, and is a 30-minute ride on the number 6 bus to the centre of Southampton from Hamble's village square. In the 1960s, when I first sailed on the River Hamble, swinging moorings were readily available, and yachts were made of wood. In the 1970s, what with the mass production of plastic boats, they were considered in derision, and the old salts would sit on the edge of the Hamble and say, bloody Tupperware, nothing will come of it. And of course now, the river is chock-a-block. It gets busy out here with up to 400 yacht movements per hour, plus canoe, paddle boards and sailing dinghies dodging about between the bigger craft. Although there are 2-hour stands at slack water, the tides run fast, especially at springs. So get your tides right and consult the charts, pilot guides and the Harbour Master's Visitor's Guide. So be cautious. And as 4.5 moorings are mostly attached by ropes, they should be avoided. Speed is limited to 6 knots. And one should not underestimate the river. Although it has a double high water with a 2-hour stand, it can have a tidal range of 5 meters and flows at 2 knots and up to 5 knots on ebb tides at springs. The channel is surveyed regularly, and it is important that yachts keep within the main marked channel and use their common sense. The river is steeped in history, going back to prehistoric times, and the outlines and ribs of old sailing vessels can be seen sticking out of the mud near the riverbanks. The famous J-class boats Endeavour, Velsheda and Lulworth were abandoned here in the late 1940s and used as houseboats in mud berths at Crablek for 30 years, until their recovery and restoration in the mid-1970s. Upstream, beyond the bridges, lies a protected wreck of Grastieu, built by Henry V. She was actively sailing from 1418 through to 1439, when sadly she was struck by lightning and burnt out. When approaching the Big Bend at Land's End on the Bursledon side, follow the main channel, but when planning navigation, be aware that strong flood and ebb tides can be experienced. You'll see the famous Jolly Sailor pub and restaurant on the port side, which can be reached by dinghies to its pontoon. Just past the Jolly Sailor is the historic Elephant Boatyard at Bursledon. You will also find the old Woolston Southampton chain ferry, used before the construction of the Itchen Bridge in 1977, and is now converted into a restaurant. Hey presto, you've now arrived at the A27 road bridge. Now you can either make the decision to take your mast down, or the bridge will take it down for you, or just turn around and go back. So, what makes this river so great? It has a history going back to the Iron Age. Its woods and boatyards have helped to build its ships and Nelson's navy. It is surrounded by natural beauty and wildlife and gives so much year-round pleasure to visitors, walkers and those who just like messing about on the river.